In a world threatened by an evil god, Setsuna, once defeated, gets a chance to rewrite history. Returning to his magical roots, he chooses melee magic, a discarded art. With unparalleled precision, he seeks to prove its worth against all odds. Follow Setsuna's quest to see him defy destiny and save humanity from certain doom. Our tale starts when humanity was on the edge of extinction, facing the menacing presence of the evil deity, Vindrake. Countless monsters ravaged the land, intent on wiping out every human. But then something intervened, causing the monsters to explode. Humanity's last hope arrived in the form of the strongest mages, who stood against the malevolent god. As the monsters charged, our protagonist, leading the mages, commanded them to unleash their magic. They launched fiery spells at the monsters while challenging Vindrake, declaring that his reign was over. With a combined effort, they attacked Vindrake using all 6 magical attributes simultaneously. Despite their hopes, Vindrake emerged from the smoke unscathed, unmoving. The mages were shocked. Gathering his magic power, the man urged his comrades to hit Vindrake harder. However, their subsequent attacks vanished before reaching him. Vindrake taunted them, calling them insignificant insects, and mocked their futile efforts. Realizing their magic was useless against Vindrake, the mages panicked. The man desperately sought a solution, but suddenly one of them was killed by an unseen attacker. They found themselves surrounded by more monsters. With mana running low, the lady, Cain, expressed her fear. As the monsters closed in, both the man and the lady were seized, pleading for salvation. Another woman who was trying to fight got eaten by a monster frog, leaving him shocked and horrified. He then used all his magical power to attack the monsters, yelling at them to stop, but Vindrake appeared behind him and struck him. Moments later, all his companions were dead, and he was badly injured. Sitting down, he was horrified to see their place in flames, with all the humans dead and the monsters feasting on them. Clenching his fist, he questioned if this was the end for humanity. Drake replied that it seemed like a hopeless struggle, but he didn't see it as their defeat just yet. He cast a spell and punched Vindrake, who managed to block it but still screamed in pain. Surprised that his attack worked, he wondered how such basic magic could harm Vindrake. He realized that he could defeat the evil god with just that, but he also realized his own vulnerability. Vindrake raised his hand to attack, saying it was as far as he would go. Then the pendant on his necklace glowed brightly. He remembered it was the necklace of rebirth given by the headmaster, containing the power of the spirit of time, allowing him to undo one regret. He had asked the headmaster if it was truly the necklace of rebirth, and the headmaster confirmed, teasing him for having no regrets yet. But the headmaster also assured him he might need it one day. Grabbing the pendant, he shouted his regret, not choosing that magic at that time. He declared to Vindrake that he would win this time, and suddenly he was back at school. Opening his eyes, a man behind him reminded him it was his turn next. It was Leo who was supposed to go missing before the evil god appeared. Looking around, he realized he had gone back 10 years. He swore he wouldn't let defeat happen again. Leo reminded him they were at a blessing ceremony, so he apologized and went to the stage. Walking there, he overheard students whispering about him being the greatest genius in the Academy's history, and another mentioning Setsuna's ability with every magic path. The man opened the magic book, and he shielded his face as the pages flew out, revealing the various paths of magic. Activating magic required specific techniques, so one had to choose a path. Learning different types of magic from different paths was challenging, like trying to believe in 2 gods simultaneously. He then called out the man's name and told him to choose his magic path. Pointing to one symbol, he asked if the man was sure of his choice. It was a symbol for long-range magic, typically effective in battle due to its ability to attack from a distance with low risk. The man remembered becoming the strongest mage in the world using long-range magic, but it was useless against the evil god. Turning away from the long-range symbols, he approached another symbol. He stopped at the sharp symbol, surprising the man and causing the students to whisper in disbelief. Leo asked why he was choosing close combat magic when he had planned to pick long-range magic that morning. He questioned if he understood that close combat magic was considered the worst option. The man explained that close combat magic focused on enhancing the body and could only be used against nearby enemies. Furthermore, the path was abandoned, akin to going into battle with bows and arrows armed only with a stone axe. The man asked if he was willing to throw away his future. He knew it was almost hopeless as a mage with that magic path against the evil god Vindrake. It was the only option to beat him. In order to do it, he had to go for it. The man and the students stared at him in shock, and the headmaster gave him a serious look. But he still reached for the symbol for close combat and picked it. The symbol was now on the back of his hand, and he thought about how he would use it to take down the evil god. He smiled confidently, but the students were horrified to see him choose the close combat path. The man closed the magic book, and Cyrus, the head of the long-range magic department, nervously told him that he had planned to share all his knowledge if he had chosen long-range magic. Cyrus then yelled at him, saying he could have become the strongest mage and gained glory, even surpassing him as his mentor. But the man just turned away, knowing that glory would mean nothing in 10 years. He knows that in 10 years, humans will be defeated, and in 5 years, the evil god will show up. He steps down from the stage, looking at his symbol, knowing he has the knowledge but little experience with close combat magic. He wonders how he'll master that magic before the evil god appears, not realizing Cyrus is furious. Moments later, the announcer tells the second-year students who have completed the acquisition right to go to their respective field classrooms. He glanced around, trying to locate the classroom for close combat magic, and noticed Leo was absent. Approaching a man for directions, the man seemed startled and hastily departed with a woman, avoiding conversation. Observing whispers among the students, he caught wind of remarks suggesting he'd made a misguided choice by opting for close combat. Recognizing a shift in treatment due to his choice of discipline, he shrugged off the negativity and resolved to find the room on his own. Recalling a campus map in the courtyard, he headed there. While entering, he was startled by someone shouting, "Fireball!" He arrived to witness a confrontation, a woman pleading for the return of a cherished brooch, while 3 men taunted her. One man speculated if the brooch was a magical device, while another dismissed it as too upscale for her. Setsuna identified the bullied woman as a fellow close combat student and the aggressors as long-range students. One of the men threatened her with fire, goading her to reclaim the brooch using her weakest close combat skills, and hurled fireballs her way. She did her best to dodge the fireballs, and Setsuna noticed she was using basic close combat magic, a kind of boost that makes you stronger and faster. But he knew even if she avoided some of the magic, the distance was too great. Then she summoned something with her power, yelling at the bullies that the brooch was something her mother had saved up for years to buy for her, and she wouldn't give it to them. She created a blade, which he recognized as close combat magic, the Mona Blade. The fire mage laughed at her, saying it was pointless, and threw fireballs at her again, making fun of whether her dagger could even reach him. One of the fireballs hit her, knocking her to the ground. The man mockingly called her pathetic, saying she couldn't do anything against them, the long-range mages. He threw another fireball at her, shouting that she'd probably never achieve anything like it in her whole life, leaving her frozen in fear as the fireballs approached. Setsuna used his magic and dashed to the men quickly. She saw him coming towards her, and luckily, he grabbed her just in time to avoid the fireballs, leaving the bullies shocked and horrified. He asked her if she knew where the close combat magic department was, saying he needed someone to show him the way, which left her looking confused. One of the bullies shouted, asking if he was Setsuna Cromwell, and they realized he had chosen close combat magic based on the symbol on the back of his hand. The fire mage turned to his friends, questioning their seriousness before expressing his approval with a loud exclamation. He conjured a fireball in his hand, suggesting that if they were to engage Setsuna in close combat, they could pummel him as much as they pleased. Setsuna approached them calmly, acknowledging the weakness of close combat magic, but highlighting its potential when wielded skillfully. As he watched, he discerned areas for improvement. Setsuna then remarked that the effectiveness of magic doesn't solely rely on its power. Despite warnings from a lady to cease, citing the senior's potential to harm him, the fire mage persisted, launching fireballs at Setsuna and disregarding her pleas. Setsuna focused his magic into his legs, enhancing his physical agility and effortlessly evading each fireball. He grinned, realizing he could outpace magical attacks with his newfound speed, eager to further test his abilities while dodging the incoming fireballs. He made fun of the mage, saying all the mage ever did was shoot fireballs, and wondered if he knew any other tricks. This made the mage flustered, and he yelled back, realizing he couldn't aim properly. Growing angrier, the mage conjured a huge fireball, warning that he wasn't joking around. But when he threw it at Setsuna, Setsuna just created a mana blade and sliced it in two. The mage couldn't believe it, and someone nearby asked Setsuna if that was even possible. Setsuna explained that it was all about skill and magic, not just raw power. Setsuna knew he wasn't the most powerful magician, but his precise control made him strong. He realized his mana blade might be more useful than he thought, especially when combined with speed. Furious, the mage threatened a bigger attack, but his friends advised against it, worried about getting in trouble from the teachers. Ignoring them, the mage began to cast his spell, but before he could finish, Setsuna rushed him, stopping his spell. Setsuna punched him in the stomach with a mana fist, leaving everyone shocked. He realized he could hold his own in close combat, even though it was considered a weak form of magic. One of the mage's friends, sweating nervously, recognized that Setsuna's skill was serious. They handed over a brooch they had taken and quickly left. Setsuna returned it to the woman, asking if it was hers. She thanked him, relieved, and tucked it away. She said she hadn't introduced herself yet, then reached out her hand and said her name was Leah Rosewell. Just as he was going to shake her hand, she grabbed it eagerly, mentioning she recognized him because of his well-known talent in all kinds of magic. She wondered why someone like him would choose close combat magic. He thought about telling her it was to defeat the evil god, but figured she wouldn't believe him, so he asked her to show him the way to the close combat magic department instead. He realized the orientation had already begun from her reaction and suggested they hurry. They walked in silence, noticing the department's building was at the edge of the campus, showing that close combat magic wasn't very popular. She insisted he teach her how to make that mana blade from earlier, but he downplayed it, saying it was just a matter of controlling mana. He understood that close combat magic could be versatile depending on the situation, and mastering it could help him counter the evil god's dispel magic. This reminded him of the day he met the headmaster. The headmaster had shown him symbols of two different magic paths on his hands, which surprised him because usually people could only follow one path. He noticed summoning magic on the headmaster's right hand, but had never seen a seal on the left. When he asked about the seal, the headmaster said he'd reveal it when the time was right, and entrusted him with the secret of that second magic path because of who he was. However, the headmaster never got around to teaching him that magic, and after the evil god emerged, the headmaster was killed. He sensed the danger of the headmaster's second magic path and vowed to learn it to change the fate of destruction. He snapped back to reality when Lila pointed out the old building ahead, signaling they had arrived. As they hurried towards it, he pondered over how he was perceived now and how he gained the headmaster's trust. As they approached the door, they saw the professor waiting, clearly annoyed. He scolded him for being late with a woman, disregarding any excuses Lila tried to give. The professor basically said, "You might have been good before, but now that you're here for close combat magic, you're worthless." The guy wasn't having it, so he pushed the professor's hand away and called him out for being rude. He asked if the professor was actually in charge of teaching close combat magic and if he took any pride in it. The professor got super mad and yelled at him for disrespecting him. But the guy stayed cool and said he believed there were still lots of cool things to discover in close combat magic. This made the professor even angrier, thinking the guy needed to be taken down a notch. So the professor told him to prove it by showing off in front of the other students. One student tried to break a stone with his mana blade, but failed miserably. He asked the professor about the test, and the professor explained it was the first one to see where they ranked in the class. In that black steel rock, there was a crystal stuck, and all he had to do was get it out fast. The professor also warned that those who failed would face consequences. Then he yelled to the students that an hour had passed, but nobody had cracked it yet. The students argued that despite the professor's confidence, the rock was incredibly tough, and they weren't sure how to break it with their current magic skills. One student loudly guessed that the professor was upset because he missed out on a promotion, which made his friend caution him to lower his voice since the professor could still hear. Spotting a free rock nearby, the professor challenged him to show what he could do with close combat magic, but he only had 10 minutes. Lila objected, saying breaking the black steel rock in 10 minutes was impossible, especially considering it was bigger than the others. The professor, unfazed, showed a timer and pointed out that while they argued, he now had only 9 minutes left. He gently nudged Lila back and touched the stone, examining it for a moment. The professor playfully asked him why he was silent, suggesting that if he apologized and bowed down, he might get more time. He firmly declined, saying 10 seconds was plenty. This annoyed the professor, who asked him to repeat himself. Lila anxiously shouted that he was being reckless. The professor, considering them foolish, remarked that the black steel rock was not only large but also dense, and even he would need 30 minutes to break it. Mockingly, he said there wouldn't be a second chance, and since he mentioned 10 seconds, he should stick to it. He calmly agreed and reassured the professor he'd prove himself while conjuring his mana blade. He focused on the stone, knowing he had to excel to impress the headmaster at least. Then, wielding his mana blade, he thrust at the stone before him, determined not to let minor obstacles hinder his goal. The blade hit the stone's center, but it didn't break, prompting the professor to mock him as all talk and question his punishment for disobeying. Suddenly, as he withdrew the blade, the stone cracked and exploded into pieces, leaving the professor baffled. He then handed the crystal to the professor, stating that it took 10 seconds, which made the professor shout in shock. Leah, along with the other students, couldn't believe he had actually done it. The students, in shock, questioned if he was stronger than their professor. Hearing this, the professor shouted, refusing to admit such a thing, claiming it was cheating. He pointed at Setsuna, arguing that the rock was so hard it wouldn't shatter even in 10 minutes. So breaking it in 10 seconds clearly indicated cheating. However, Setsuna simply asked the professor what he meant by 10 minutes for a rock like that, and suggested that perhaps it was time for him to resign and start over as a student. The professor, shouting in anger, called him a brat, but then someone appeared behind him and called the professor by his name, Zakari. The man then grabbed Zakari's bald head, inquiring if he was bullying students again. Zakari, stuttering, addressed the man as head professor Lionel. Lionel, with a yawn, mentioned they were interrupting his nap and told Zakari that Setsuna hadn't cheated at all because he read the flow of mana within the rock and aimed for its weakest point. Lionel then questioned Zakari's competence as an instructor for not being able to see through it, making Zakari jump a little in fear. Lionel shouted to get everyone's attention and announced that their professor Zakari was about to demonstrate Monoguard Fing himself. Lionel assured Zakari that if he had trained regularly, he wouldn't die from it. Zakari, in fear, swung his hands forward, admitting his fault and swearing never to do it again. Nonetheless, Lionel still punched Zakari, who fortunately managed to cover himself with his arm and slammed into the building door. Setsuna realized that breaking through the Monoguard barrier would take a lot of power. He wondered about Lionel, knowing he wasn't just some regular guy. Lionel walked over, tapped Setsuna on the back, and praised him for his skills in close combat, even though he wasn't high up in the rankings. He encouraged Setsuna to keep giving his all. As Lionel was about to leave, Setsuna told him that being good at close combat didn't mean he'd lose to others. He promised to use his close combat skills to rise to the top. Lionel smiled, impressed by Setsuna's determination, and offered to teach him magic if he ever wanted to learn. As Lionel walked away, he felt happy knowing someone else shared his unusual beliefs. Later, Lionel introduced himself to the students and explained the upcoming exchange match where the magic departments would compete. He reluctantly said it was time to pick a representative. Setsuna, who had won before as a long-range combatant, knew he couldn't miss this chance again. While thinking, Setsuna noticed bits of black steel rock on the ground. Lionel told him someone else had passed the test by breaking the crystal with their fists. Setsuna looked at a man in the room, wondering if he could throw those fragments. Lionel called Drago forward. Drago asked if Setsuna was really the one, questioning why someone with talent in other magic areas would choose close combat. Setsuna tried to explain, but Drago interrupted, loudly questioning his physique. Drago bragged about his family's history in close combat magic and his own years of training. Then he suddenly punched Setsuna hard. Setsuna didn't move, while other students fell. Drago challenged him to a fight, refusing to let someone who didn't take close combat seriously be the representative. Setsuna remembered hearing Drago's mention during the representative match before he regressed. Drago stood out as the only noteworthy figure from the generally underestimated close combat department. Agreeing to the challenge, Setsuna dared Drago to bring it on. However, Lionel stepped in, satisfied that they had come to an understanding, and announced that the match would happen in a week. As Drago left, he cautioned Setsuna not to even think about trying to escape during that time, and asserted that as a close combat mage, Setsuna should be ready to fight to the end. Others speculated on who might win, but one woman doubted Setsuna's chances against Drago, considering his lack of physical training. Lila, concerned, asked Setsuna if he truly thought he could win, to which he surprisingly admitted no, leaving her stunned. Setsuna knew he couldn't match Drago's trained body in his current condition, but he wasn't without a plan. Leah followed him, curious about his next move. They soon arrived at a forest where Lila was amazed to see a massive tree. She asked about the significance of their location, and Setsuna revealed it was his secret training spot, known only to him. Confidently, he told her that in this place he would become 3 times stronger. She noted that it must be a sacred tree, likely over 1,000 years old. Suddenly the tree emitted a green light, enveloping Setsuna as well, making him feel it and realizing he was being acknowledged by the tree. Once more she inquired about the light emanating from the tree, and he explained it was the blessing of the sacred tree. He told her it was only bestowed upon those recognized by the sacred tree, in appreciation for their holy mana attribute. This meant he could replenish his mana. He also assured her that as long as he was there, he had no worries about running out of mana and could train until he reached his limit. Impressed, she resolved to help him, seeing as he had helped her retrieve her brooch, and decided to start scouting, leaving him puzzled. The next day in the close combat training room, Layla glanced around and was stunned to see Drago effortlessly lifting the heavy barbells. She couldn't believe her eyes and wondered what was going on. Drago called Lionel and asked about the black steel rocks in the yard. Lionel questioned if Drago planned to crush them all. Drago assured him he wouldn't, then moved the rocks behind him and started doing push-ups, claiming he was just borrowing them. Watching from a distance, Lila was horrified, imagining the devastation Drago could cause with a punch. She quickly left, worrying about Setsuna's safety. Meanwhile, in the forest, Setsuna sat against the sacred tree, absorbed in a martial arts book. Lila appeared breathless and questioned his relaxed demeanor. She informed him about Drago's intense training with the black steel rocks. Setsuna wasn't surprised, explaining it was part of Drago's physical conditioning, and reassured Lila not to worry, as it aligned with his plan. He returned to his reading, explaining to Lila the concept of enhancing physical abilities through focused concentration and mana manipulation. When he finished the book, Setsuna discarded it, stood up, and removed his coat, emphasizing the importance of putting theory into practice. As a leaf fell from the tree, Setsuna swiftly struck it with his leg before it touched the ground. With precision, he shattered every falling leaf with his mana blade, leaving Layla in awe of his skill. Excitedly, she told him she'd never heard of a method to learn that fast, but he said it wasn't enough. Suddenly, he felt dizzy and in pain, collapsing to the ground from exhaustion. He saw his hand was bruised and severely injured, but insisted he was fine, attributing it to pushing his muscles to the limit with physical exertion. He focused on boosting his healing, and miraculously, his severely injured body healed in seconds. He explained he could strengthen his body quickly. She urged him not to push himself like that, suggesting there must be another way. He disagreed, saying he couldn't keep up with Drago's years of close combat magic training with half-hearted methods. He explained he needed to repeat the intense training method 1,000 more times in the remaining week. She was horrified, asking what he meant by 1,000 times when one cycle was already so painful. He smiled, recalling the tough training he endured back in the orphanage. Setsuna couldn't use magic initially and struggled in practice every day, but persevered, getting better gradually. He believed as long as he could get stronger, the pain was worth it. They spent days practicing and training together, Setsuna proving he worked harder than anyone. On the day of the match with Drago, tension filled the air as they faced off on stage. Drago taunted him for not running away, but Setsuna stood his ground, representing the close combat department. With Lionel's signal, the match began, and Setsuna lunged at Drago. Despite Drago's defense, Setsuna managed to push him back with a powerful kick. He realized Drago was guarding against every move. When Drago launched a strong punch, Setsuna blocked it, surprising everyone. Onlookers criticized the intensity of the match, questioning if it was just a promotion. Setsuna acknowledged the danger of taking a direct hit from Drago. Drago attempted to punch him again, but he managed to dodge it. Drago kept throwing punches, and he kept dodging or blocking them. Drago yelled, asking why he was only defending, but he stayed silent and continued dodging, causing Drago to pause and remark on his physical weakness. Layla observed that despite Setsuna's training, he still couldn't match Drago. They continued exchanging blows, and Lionel, watching, noticed Setsuna being pushed back slightly. When Drago raised his foot to kick, Setsuna blocked it in time, frustrating Drago. But Lionel understood that Setsuna was effectively defending with his mana control. Despite Drago's frustration, Setsuna remained on the defensive. Drago angrily spoke of the prejudice elites held against close combat, but Setsuna stayed silent. Drago mentioned his family's legacy in close combat and the humiliation they endured, vowing to change their fate. He conjured a Monoblade, declaring his determination. Setsuna also summoned a Monoblade, and they charged at each other. Their blades clashed, with Drago attempting slashes that Setsuna evaded. Drago leaped at him, but Setsuna dodged, causing damage to the stage. Drago pressed on, but Setsuna stood firm, blocking Drago's attacks. He recalled hearing students saying it was over for him and criticized for his choice of magic. Setsuna acknowledged Drago's words, but then swiftly countered, disarming Drago momentarily. He then launched his own attack, questioning if they both weren't aiming for something greater. Drago was shocked by his question and then saw his armor break and his weapon explode. But instead of panicking, he grinned and even chuckled as he tried to hit him. However, he dodged with a smile. Circling around Drago, he utilized his speed boost skill to strike Drago from behind. But Drago managed to defend against the attacks. As Drago kept defending himself, Layla thought their strategy was effective, while Lionel marveled at Setsuna's incredible mana control and physical abilities, pondering who would emerge victorious. Knowing he needed to find an opening despite Drago's solid defense, he stepped back, prompting Drago to do the same. Drago then swung another blade at him, but he leaned back just in time to evade it. Drago swung again with more force, pushing him back slightly upon blocking. Observing Drago exhausting his mana, he quickly leaped backward, avoiding both Drago's attack and the ground's destruction. Realizing he was almost off the stage, Drago thought he had him trapped, assuming he couldn't use his usual agile footwork there. Flexing his muscles confidently, Drago charged with a punch, but he remained composed, allowing Drago's punch to pass through him like water, revealing it was just an illusion. Appearing above Drago, he explained how by concentrating his mana where he stood, he could leave behind an illusion, momentarily surprising Drago. He snuck up behind Drago, poised to swing his blade, but Drago spun around, fist ready to strike back. He warned Drago it was over and swiftly slashed him before Drago could retaliate. Layla and the others were shocked by the attack, and Lionel noticed it was strategically timed to counter Drago's aggressive move. Lionel then called an end to the match, declaring Setsuna Cromwell the winner. Leah cheered, but the rest of the students were stunned. Drago struggled to get up, surprising everyone after taking Setsuna's hit. Drago couldn't believe it and realized Setsuna had held back with the final blow of the Mona blade. Suddenly, Setsuna reached out to Drago, but Drago questioned his motives. Setsuna looked at him silently, then explained he fought to never be defeated and to protect what mattered to him, vowing to become the strongest. Drago was taken aback by his resolve and admitted Setsuna was indeed strong. With that, Drago accepted Setsuna's hand, conceding defeat and acknowledging Setsuna's reputation. Setsuna then considered Drago's power might be valuable in the fight against the evil god. That's all for today. Make sure to like and subscribe. I'll upload the second part when this video gets 10 likes. Till then, bye.